Support for KBMF comes from the Beat Frame Shop and Gallery, located on Main Street in Uptown Views, just across from the Beacon Noodle Parlor. The Beat Frame Shop offers framing and matting services for holidays,
Are you ready for this?
More. Reach them by phone at 782-7710.
Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality?
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more how do you okay.
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality goals.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
Yes, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are now listening to Post-Orthodoxy. This is a radio show about changing our minds. If you're confused, that's understandable because the 5 to 6 p.m. slot on Thursdays is technically for the Jolly Roger, a kid co-hosted talk radio show. However, this afternoon, I found out that unfortunately my co-host was in a car accident last night. Everybody's fine.
Everybody's fine,
but she is not leaving the house for a while. And I was like, go see a chiropractor right now. She's like, well, but my back hurts too much to move right now. I'm like, that is exactly why you need to go see a chiropractor right now. So we're going to do a post-orthodoxy sidecar, and it seems like there's kind of, there's obviously plenty to talk about these days.
You think so?
Yeah, post-orthodoxy is a radio show about changing our minds and about freeing our minds and about being able to see what's going on around us clearly without, trying not to be brainwashed, trying not to be dogmatic. And right now, there are just a million things that we could talk about every show.
1,000,006.
Yes, about things happening, people have opinions about, and we like to try to help folks understand where those opinions might have come from, if your opinions are actually your own opinions, and what you can do to find reliable news sources about these things that are happening in the world, these shocking things.
We do cultural analysis from a post-cult survivor perspective. How's that?
Very specific perspective.
Yeah, from a cult survivor perspective.
Post-cult, cultural analysis from a post-cult perspective.
Yeah, that's
kind of like that.
Yeah, because the cult could be you and I, our own little individual boutique cults,
cult.
or the cult of the zeitgeist.
I like how you always put an angry face on every single one of our live streams.
I do.
Just to make it spicy.
Getting some action
for
going.
people that might want to watch it.
Somebody's angry.
I should watch this because someone's angry.
What are they angry about?
Ooh. And unfortunately, that is the case. Like, sensational stuff gets more attention. So,
right.
Yep, sensational stuff gets more attention. So it would make sense that people would want to watch something that somebody's more angry about than anything else. So we only have an hour today. We're here from 5 till 6, and then Big Dan C comes in for the
audio hallucinations.
That's the one.
Yes.
I got a little thrown off because it's the Sunday Smack. I was like, what day of the week is it? I don't know.
Right.
Because you're here. It's usually a co-host, the guest, a
child,
a young person.
Human.
Yes. Yeah. Younger human.
Smaller human.
I'm Ainsley. This is Dark. You're listening to KBMF, LP Butte.
Yeah, this is the Post-Orthodoxy sidecar show.
In which we have plenty to talk about anyway, and so we might as well fill the hour with current events from a post-cult perspective.
So I have decided to take a step back from the Facebooking.
How so? All Facebooking?
Just from the Facebooking as a thing, as a habit. Like, there's a really wonderful book called Culture Jam, written by a guy named Callie Lawson, who was the guy who started Dadbusters magazine, if anybody's hip to that whole thing. He's the guy that started the Buy Nothing Day. Buy Nothing Day was supposed to replace Black Friday because of our ridiculous consumption, cultural style of consumption.
Ugh.
Anyway, he wrote a book called Culture Jam. Mm-hmm. In the book, he was talking about the phenomena of television when it came out and what it was doing to people's brains. Some folks in Canada thought it might be worth studying.
Because we didn't always have voices in our homes telling us stuff.
Well, we had radio, but
we still didn't always, radio didn't always exist either.
Right, so I believe this is the way it works in the book. It's been a few years since I read it, but there was a study in Canada that was looking at how people dealt with that thing in their environment, the glowing box, the television. How they deal with
What
how,
era?
This is 1950s, 60s, when it was just a new thing,
Mhm.
right? So like, well, there's this new thing in the environment, maybe we should see what effect it has on humans. What they found out is men were more prone to become couch potatoes.
Okay.
And because of the intake of information, being an informed unit in your tribe, so people stuck to their couches more. They figured out a way to increase that in the 80s with this thing called the jump cut. So whenever we had music videos on MTV, back when MTV was music videos, the videos piloted this style of editing that was, it might be a gun, it might be a boob, it might be a tree, here's a frog, there's a, all this, and what that does to the human brain in general, and to the male brain in particular, is that their brain is trying to make sense of two things that don't make sense together, like a frog and a gun. So you cut from a frog to a gun, or whatever the thing is. So what happens there's a fight or flight thing that happens in the male brain especially, that wants to now make sense of the chaos that's in his environment.
Right.
So they found that through the jump cuts of not only MTV videos, but they started doing it in television shows, they started doing it on news as well, that people would just sit in front because it put them into a mild fight or flight mode. That style of editing.
And that kind of up feeling of the endorphins or the chemicals in
you
the brain.
get an endorphin rush because your brain starts saying, this doesn't make sense, how do I make sense of it?
Right.
So now we do that to ourselves. We do our own jump cuts because if we have a diversified feed on our social media feed, on our news feed, and you just scroll up, you're going from, like, for me, it's people who love Trump and people who hate Trump and people who don't care about politics and people, there's this whole
constantly
thing.
New stuff.
So I think in terms of the world that I live in, or the country in particular, the country that I live in, I look at my feed from my country people.
Mm-hmm.
And
as in the U.S.
The U.S. and I try, and beyond even, but especially in the U.S. And then I try to make sense of it in my brain.
Yeah.
Right.
How's that working out for you?
I had to get off Facebook for a while. So I'm doing Facebook in terms of the Post-Orthodoxy page. I may post articles there around the subject matter of the topic of our show. I'll be interacting there.
So
the idea
if you were to put it back down to
scrolling,
one sentence, why do you feel like you need to, why do you desire to leave the timeline for a while?
I realize that I'm becoming dumb.
You are getting stupider?
I'm getting dumber by interacting in my Facebook feed. I have a lot of smart people in my Facebook feed. I also have a lot of people that just want to argue for argument's sake. A lot of people who, it's that thing where somebody says, there's the image that I left on my Facebook page. What I left is some professor giving a lecture, and the quote, which I can't read in full due to
FCC
rules. This is the amount of energy necessary to refute bull data.
Bull crap.
Is an order of magnitude larger than to produce it.
So there's no way we can compete with all the bull crap.
Right.
At the same rate that it's being produced.
Just try to make sense of the world, and then just try to articulate that sense that you're making is a Sisyphean issue that I'm too exhausted to continue for a while. So I think there might be other ways to have conversations. There might be other ways to have dialogues. I would like to, we've been isolated for a long time. It'd be nice to have some social distance gatherings where we can
actually talk with humans.
Sit down and have some chats about people's impressions of what's going on. But I'm not really enjoying the Facebook thing anymore. I feel like I hit a critical mass where I felt suddenly futile in the style in which I was interacting on.
Yes.
But
however,
just before I decided to make that post last night and go to bed, I started hearing about what was happening in Seattle.
What's happening in Seattle?
There's been action taking place in an area of Seattle called Capitol Hill. the Capitol Hill Police Department boarded itself up and left.
Oh.
And the sign now says Capitol Hill People Department.
Aww.
And the whole neighborhood is sort of designated as a zone. And it's operating in the way what I saw Occupy Wall Street operating, and to a certain degree the way that I saw Standing Rock operating. It is, in my estimation, what we've been talking about in a few of our past shows. It is anarchy.
Right.
It's a self-governing, self-organizing area of the city that is no longer being controlled by the police department.
And now a lot of people think anarchy means all the kids running around naked after bath because they refuse to go to bed and the house is a mess and there's nothing you can do to get anybody under control.
People are not getting permits to barbecue on the sidewalk right now.
Anarchy!
Yeah, that's anarchy.
Right.
People are not getting permits for barbecuing on the sidewalk, and they're not getting busted for barbecuing on the sidewalk. So
people are spray painting over McDonald's billboards and putting art there instead. Anarchy.
There's food, and it's become, I guess people are donating food, so if you go into that zone, it's kind of an anarchic education zone. I haven't been there. I don't know.
No, I've spent the day since you told me about it kind of combing my news sources. So direct information from people who are actually there to
Right.
kind of try to get an idea of what's going on in the Free Capitol Hill zone.
So I will defer to you for the news bits, and I'll just bring people up to speed to why I got interested in this. So,
yes, please do.
When I woke up this morning, I decided to do some research, not on Facebook. I'm just going to Google the issue. What's going on in Seattle with this thing? So the first thing that comes up is, one of the first things is a big Seattle Times or whatever the big newspaper is. Article comes up talking about the autonomous zone, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, hashtag CHAZ, which I thought, that's a horrible acronym, CHAZ.
Right.
CHAZ is basically your basic fraternity white guy.
As one organizer from inside the zone responded, we didn't pick that name.
We didn't pick that.
Twitter picked that name.
Right, so I thought, okay, so I read the article, and there was a lady quoted in the article who I am friends with on Facebook, who I know from living in Northern California. So somebody alerted to me. They said, "Oh, I think we know her from Nevada City." So I sent her a message and said, "Hey, what's going on over there?" And I said, I'm curious to see what's going on in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and what's the news, right? She's like, first of all, don't say that.
Don't call it that.
Don't call it that. I'm like, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone or the news?
Right.
So apparently when you have an anarchic movement, there's not always the media office, somebody who's dictating image or brand.
Right.
So signs went up that said Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Some people are not happy.
Signs also went up that said, "Welcome to Free Capitol Hill."
Free Capitol Hill. So different people have their impressions of what's going on. This is where I really feel like it's important, if you're going to be a part of an anarchist movement and form a new society, get your poets on board.
Name it yourself.
Get your poets on board and have some folks who can come up with a name that doesn't invite endless criticism. So this idea of...
They're owning it, they're working with it.
Right, autonomous. So autonomous means that you're free and independent. When you're an island in the middle of a city with no way in or out, you're not autonomous.
And to kind of, as we usually do on Post-Orthodoxy, we name drop the issue, and then we have to zoom out and zoom in, because there are a lot more perspectives in the world than just mine or yours or the listeners. And as many neoconservatives and conservatives and various people who are doing their best to tear down or vilify or ruin the reputation of what's going on in the autonomous zone, the attack that they're taking is this kind of literalist black and white attack of, you're calling it an autonomous zone, so we're going to need to see your passport when you want to leave the autonomous zone and come back into the US. And if you want supplies brought to you, you're going to have to negotiate treaties and trade organizations with the President of the United States. and we're going to have the city turn off your electricity since you guys are so autonomous. We're going to turn off the electricity to that district. So there are some people out there that are kind of being jerks and literalists in an attempt to just discredit the whole thing because somebody picked a name that's not perfectly etymologically describing what's going on.
Black Lives Matter happened on Twitter after the end of the case.
Defund the police, quote unquote.
Defund the police is another problematic phrase.
Right. It's not etymologically correctly what we're doing. We're
Well,
talking about
is.
decommodifying the police. It's not just that we want to take money away from them. It's that we're trying to stop making the police force a income generating organization.
Right. So there's a lot to the defund the police thing. It is starting a dialogue. The problem is there's some people who just want to, as you say, seize upon the perhaps etymologically incorrect phrase. It's my friend Mad Dog.
One thing that you're doing wrong and use that one thing you're doing wrong to discredit the entire movement.
Right, my friend Mad Dog has been ranting about the defund the police phrase because it like when the message isn't straightforward and clear and delivers the idea, then we can just get lost in attacking and defending semantics, and that is really deflating for something to happen. So he had a whole rant about the defund the police phrase and the problematic nature of the phrase, and somebody else said hashtag reimagine justice.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. Now that
that does not have anything to specifically do with the police.
reimagine justice.
It's positive.
It's more positive. I don't know. It's problematic. Both of them are problematic. So
I like to try to flip phrases around and use positive language
Yes.
because I know how powerful our words are and how much how our language influences us. So I try to keep war language out of my dialogue. I try to use positive phrases instead of negative phrases. For instance, I don't say, I try not to say negative stuff. Instead, I say, I try to say positive stuff.
right, sure.
Yeah.
So I immediately decided we should go to Capitol Hill, like Post-Orthodoxy. We should go to Capitol Hill. We should bring cameras and microphones.
Yeah, I was watering the garden. You're like, let's go to Seattle.
Yeah, let's go see what's going on out there because it's early. The fact that they have established a zone, whatever they want to call it, they've established a zone. They're already starting to plant vegetables in the park. That is going to be, and those actions of planting vegetables in the park is, I think, a way of saying we plan on being here a while.
Yeah, you don't think they're just doing it for fun?
No, that means we're setting down roots. I mean, that's literal and figuratively setting down roots when you start planting vegetables in the park. So, like Occupy Wall Street, that went on for a long time.
How long was the Occupy Wall Street movement?
It went on for months. Winter came. And it got too cold.
Oh, in New York City, yeah.
And they ran out of tear gas, I guess, and they started using more billy clubs. But that hit every state. And what we're seeing with the George Floyd protest is another iteration of an ongoing struggle to deal with problems in our justice systems, namely the police force.
Yeah.
So, but it's not just the police force, it's also the justice system. If you haven't seen The 13th, that's a movie that is available on Netflix that explains systemic racism. A lot of people don't know what that means, systemic racism. I'm not a racist, that kind of thing.
Right.
Systemic racism
Or
means
structural racism.
Structural racism.
Is a good way to shake it up in your ears if you're tired of hearing systemic.
What that means is if something is happening and there's no racists present, the results will end up being racist because of the nature and the architecture of the system involved.
Right.
That's what they're talking about.
Sometimes things happen that involve you that are not you being a racist.
For-profit prisons have proven to be a racist policy. The track record is racist. The drug war was designed as racist and has played out to be racist. That's a part of the system. This is a part of the issue that's needing to be addressed. That George Floyd is just another person in a long series of people who keep bringing this thing to the surface, and now it's broken through again. I also feel that this is a part of a larger problem, which is a class problem, a class war problem, problem and an income inequality problem. there's a lot of people who are on a really thin thread financially. And the perfect storm of people being out of work because of the virus and this being a lot on the internet allowed the hashtagtivism to pop again.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in Capitol Hill, in my estimation, is though George Floyd was the catalyst for this, Seattle has a long history of these kinds of actions and movements and getting change within the city because of them. So this is another iteration of what's happening, of a Seattle story, and it has nods to the Occupy movement, it has nods to Standing Rock in terms of the anarchic, is it oxymoronic to say the anarchic structure? The anarchic quality of the event, the spontaneousness, and the fact that people were talking about riots and police. Now the police are not there. There hasn't been
any violence.
Yes. But the news is talking about the anarchy of the thing in terms that make it seem as if it's a terrible thing.
Yes.
You've been doing some research.
Children running wild in the streets.
Exactly. You've gone down the rabbit hole. You've been looking at what's going on around this because today, the headlines today were, and this is what I found really interesting, the headlines today were Donald Trump is sending nasty emails to the governor and to the mayor saying, you better get it together, I'm going to come in here and mess up. And that's what people focused on, but not the nature of the thing, which is...
Or what they're there to try to do.
And, I did scroll on Facebook a little bit today. I didn't comment, I didn't post, I'm not doing it, but I did because I wanted to see if there was anything in the feed. Very, very, very little in my feed about what's happening in Seattle. And from what I've seen in the past, I feel like this is something that has the potential to go deep into the summer and spread to other cities across the country, if not other places around the world. So I feel like we're at the beginning of something here, and I was really amazed at its absence in our newsfeed. So what did you, when you went down the rabbit hole, the hashtag rabbit hole, what did you find?
Yeah, and I think this is a good moment to interject maybe some useful information for people who might be listening about where to get real news.
Oh, yeah.
Because
tell me.
Part of the reason both of us have exited this Facebook soup temporarily is because Facebook is a regurgitation site. There are very, very, very few people or pages on Facebook creating news there on Facebook. All of the things that you find on Facebook or that your friends are sharing on Facebook are coming from other sources. And it's important to know those sources. Sometimes it's from The Atlantic or CNN. Sometimes it's a YouTube video from a popular YouTube speaker. Sometimes it's
Twitter video.
TikTok video. Lot of Facebook is screenshots of what's happening on Twitter or Reddit.
Right, that's the only thing that I'm saying.
And so, I've been kind of ageist about the whole social media thing, like, well, I picked one and it's fine and I don't want to have to, not that I really don't want to, I just didn't really feel like I had the time or the energy to keep up with all of the changing social medias because as, technology is evolving exponentially.
Yes.
It's not evolving at the same rate it was evolving 10 years ago or 50 years ago. We went from bombing people from airplanes to being on the moon in 20 years. It's ridiculous. So now things are evolving super fast. The generations are getting smaller. So people used to say a generation was maybe 20, 25 years. Now generations are 10 to 15 years because the experience of the 10-year-olds is so much different than the experience the 15-year-olds had when they were 10, 5 years ago.
Right.
So, yes, Facebook is kind of the megalodon in the social media realm, but I think it's an old beast, and it's not evolving productively, and there are other social media platforms that people in the world are congregating on to network with each other and share news and to continue to evolve as a species. And if I feel remiss, I feel that if I continue to only use Facebook to communicate and to find news, not only will I be missing communicating with huge demographics of the planet who don't use Facebook, lots of people under 30 just don't use Facebook at all.
Sure.
But I also feel that I will be missing out on quality internet community And I don't think Facebook is as quality as it used to be because it is a regurgitation site. So I started spending more time on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. These are sites where people are creating content that often gets shared by someone on Facebook. So if you go to Twitter, Reddit, or Instagram, and you can find firsthand accounts of people from all over the country of what is actually going on. You don't have to turn on your TV and hope that someone on your television reads a news clip that they got from someone else who is in the field, who's observing it as an outsider and reporting back, and then you get a 5-second soundbite.
Right.
You can go on Instagram or Twitter or Reddit and talk to and hear from actual humans actually perceiving and sharing what is really happening real time.
You can get right to the source.
You get right to the source.
I tried to do that this morning. I contacted somebody who I saw quoted in the Seattle Times, and it was the catalyst for me to say, okay, there's already a whole other dialogue happening right there at that spot.
Even with the unification efforts of the internet, there are already separate perceptions of what's going on Free Capitol Hill in Seattle. So I started keeping a list of Instagram accounts and Twitter hashtags and Reddit accounts that people can follow, and these are all platforms. If you use the internet to find your news at all, these are all platforms that you can use to find more accurate, more up-to-date, and less spin-doctored news about what's going on in the country than Facebook. And so on Instagram, I started following at Free Capitol Hill, at Officer Chaz on Twitter.
Officer Chaz.
So it seems to be a semi-official account for the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which is where Chaz comes from. And they just renamed themselves Officer Chaz since there's no police officers there anymore.
That's great.
It's Officer, this entire group of people. Also on Twitter, some sweet person who is not even in the autonomous zone, but has the resources to provide a useful service to this group of folks, has created at Chaz_WX, which is a weather account. So this person has created a weather service for people in the autonomous zone. And he collates data from other news sources about what's going on in the weather just to let people in the zone know, because they're all using Twitter. They are not using TVs. They're not using radios. They're on the ground with their phones and their internet using Twitter. That is the communication. That is the news.
My first admonishment was not to use the phrase Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Directly from someone who's in the zone.
And that's what we titled our show.
Yeah, well, I took that into account when I started my research. And in a few hours of looking through news and information from people in the zone.
Twitter has already run with it. And it's
only one person said, please don't use that.
It's already been
at this
defined
point,
by
you
Twitter.
just have to start using it if you want your information to get shared through the hashtags.
Well, I think so, but I think I like Officer Chaz. That's a nice workaround. I think that's really good. We could call it the Capitol Hill Zone or something. I think the autonomous thing is problematic. Like one thing I noticed when I went to Standing Rock is people kept calling them protesters. We're not protesting. We're protecting. We're protecting.
Language is powerful.
Yeah, we're protecting this water here. We're not protesting. It's a very different connotation. So I don't know what the title of this thing is. Like Occupy Wall Street was very straightforward and clear. They went to Wall Street and they occupied it. There was no ambiguousness.
That is a very straightforward term.
Yes.
I think people are using a couple of different hashtags. If folks want to follow the news, this is how you follow the news in the new age. I'm going to break it down for you. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to wonder anymore. You can know how to have news from the source that's not spin doctored anymore.
Tell us about it.
You can follow hashtags on Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit.
I'm learning.
So you go and you search that hashtag, and you will find news. People are tagging, they're sorting it like folders on your computer or socks in your sock drawer. They're sorting their news based on these hashtags. Hashtag people over property. Hashtag the zone. Hashtag Free Capitol Hill. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I like the term the zone because the zone has a connotation back to like being in the moment, really.
When I hear the zone, I think of a bouncy house play park.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a brand. It's a brand of bouncy houses.
It's a generational thing, I guess.
Yeah, sorry.
What else do you find with your hashtags out there?
So one thing that's happening, and unfortunately in my rabid searching and information digesting, I clicked away from this post, but I self-identified neoconservatives on Reddit were sharing information around with each other to help each other discredit and dismantle the Free Capitol Hill credibility.
Propaganda campaign.
Yeah, so self-identified neoconservatives on Reddit.
Public relations campaign.
Right, not propaganda. So they were like, here's what we need to do, guys. And now when you're on Reddit, this is a crowdsourced new information. So everybody can post, and the more people that think it's valid or interesting, the more that thing gets seen.
It gets moved up the hierarchy.
Yeah, which is just how Facebook works anyway, except that on Reddit, you are part of the algorithm instead of the algorithm deciding what you want to see. Right. So they're saying upvote negative comments and false information. Downvote anything positive coming out of Free Capitol Hill. Downvote anything asking for resources or sharing information about what's really going on. These self-identified neoconservatives were also telling people they were instructing people on how to create fake screenshots of people. So they're like, go find a Twitter account of someone who says that they're inside the Free Capitol Hill zone, and here's how you create a photoshopped fake screenshot of
they gave a template.
Yeah, they're like, here's how to make fake news as if it's coming from these protesters. So they're already, it's only been 2 days.
Right.
It's only been 2 days.
There's a campaign.
And there's a campaign.
Most people haven't even heard of what's going on in Seattle.
And already, for instance, one girl shared a meta screenshot of a text message from a friend of hers who was saying, hey, I found this screenshot of your Twitter account saying that homeless people stole all your food and now the Free Capitol Hill zone doesn't have food.
Right.
And the friend is like, yeah, I didn't say that. So people are targeting the leaders of this zone, and they're targeting people putting news out, and they're targeting people who are in the zone and making fake news bits and resharing those.
So you gotta trust your sources. You gotta go to sources that you trust instead of just seeing whatever meme comes across your
I think it's even more than just trusting your source, because that makes people just go froth at the mouth of just hoping that they'll find a source they can trust. I just want to find someone I can trust. I think it's more like when you hear something and it gets your jollies up, reconsider and fact check. Don't just take anything at face value. Take everything with a grain of salt. And especially if it's sensational, go find another source of that thing. Google image that image.
So whenever I saw what was happening with Standing Rock through Unicorn Riot, and I noticed Unicorn Riot has been oddly quiet on my Facebook feed. That's why the sources that used to be in my feed, because I patronized them, because I watched a lot of it, have not showed up anymore. So that's another reason that I'm leaving, because I'm just getting a lot of lame info. I'm getting a lot of really milquetoast info on my feed.
And people being stubborn.
So when I went to Standing Rock, basically I saw what was happening on Facebook, on the Unicorn Riot video. I came down and did a show that night with the station manager of the Park and Dark show. I said, hey, we should go out there and do something. People came and gave us some money and said, you guys should go out there and see what's going on and tell us what's going on. So we went out there for 4 days, came back, broke a story that was in 50 newspapers that flew in the face of the narrative of the official story from the Morton County Police Department and the national media. Like, just 4 people in a broken down RV went out and broke a national story, because everything I was saying outside of independent journalists was nothing, prepared me for nothing for what was actually going on at the site.
In plain speak, they were lying.
They were, lying through omission, a lot of it. Just lying. Well, the media, the mainstream media was definitely lying.
Yeah, if you
the sheriff's department was lying.
If you did that to your mom, she would call it lying.
So we were
your mom would call this lying, it's lying.
The sheriff's department lied. The media repeated it. We had witnesses on the bridge that saw that that was a lie. And so we were able to write that story. So once I saw what was happening on Capitol Hill, and it's like, there's very little information that I could find. Even, I didn't go down the hashtag rabbit hole. I just wanted to know what was being floated out into the world.
Yeah.
And so I feel strongly that I want to go out there and see what's going on. I feel like we should go see what's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
Just for my own edification.
I think
and when I say trust your sources, that's what I'm talking about. I want to send somebody that I know out there to come back and tell me what happened. It almost has to be that direct. And we can do that with social media.
Right. You can now, you're not just getting your news from some pretty woman in a pretty suit who's repeating factoids that she was given in an email bulletin that morning. Like, you're getting news from a person who went there, looked at it, talked to the people, took the photos, and brought it back and showed it to you.
So what else did you uncover in the hashtag land around what's happening in the Capitol Hill section of
Well,
Seattle?
Oddly enough, as often happens with movements that might actually shake up the status quo and make things better for the impoverished people of the U.S., there are so many conversations going on around the idea of this Capitol Hill zone that I couldn't actually find anything about what is it that they're trying to do by being there.
Okay.
So many people are talking about, should we call it the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone or not? So many people are talking about whether or not this local rapper, Raz Simone, is calling himself the new warlord of the Capitol Hill Zone.
Wait, he's calling himself that?
President Trump called him a self-proclaimed warlord, and now people think that Raz Simone proclaimed himself the warlord of the zone.
But we don't know if that's the case.
But we don't know if that's the case.
Okay.
It's so hard.
Right.
This is why it's so important to not just take the first piece of news that feels like candy in your ears.
Right, sure.
So, this guy...
I'm not question anything Trump says. I'm not letting that source fly.
If you look at this guy's actual Twitter feed, he has a very loving, inclusive, intelligent, logical, educated Twitter feed. And also, he's a black man stepping up to powerfully protect his new community.
Open carry, because you can do that.
You can open carry in Seattle. So
Right.
him and some friends are open carrying at the perimeters of the free Capitol Hill zone in case, and this is as far as I could tell from the various news sources I dug into, in case the police decide to come back,
Or
like they've been doing everywhere else.
Or Antifa, or not Antifa.
Fake Antifa.
The sort of black bloc folks, the guys all covered up, you don't know who they
Right.
are, come and smash windows.
Right.
That group.
And so Raz is spending all his time on Twitter saying, I didn't say this tweet, and he's sharing screenshots that these neoconservative propaganda artists are creating to try to discredit him as a powerful black man.
Benny M. West commented, said, Seattle simply has anarchy, that's what's happening. Yes.
Yes.
That's our point.
There's
this is how anarchy works.
a little
and-
zone.
Yeah.
A little zone in Seattle is doing anarchy.
In that zone of anarchy, there are some commercial signs getting damaged, but otherwise there's people watching movies on the street,
Yeah.
educating themselves,
Music.
setting up voter registration booths,
Yeah.
providing free food, having an open mic and an open forum where people can actually hear each other in person.
Within 2 days, they've already set up a co-working space for people who need tools to work on various
Co-working
projects.
space, I'm sure kitchens have been set up there, people who are volunteering to do night patrol security, and people who are volunteering who just randomly walk around picking up trash.
Yeah.
That's the anarchy that's going on right now.
As in, this is my community. Society doesn't happen to me. I create society. And if I am creating society, then I'm creating a better society than the one that was given to me.
So Benny West, you're correct. That is anarchy, and that's what's going on over there right now.
I'm afraid I would get addicted to it.
It's an early stage of anarchy.
As a person,
And anarchy, I feel like, is just a thing that happens until something more permanent happens.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I like using the word anarchy because it does evoke something that is the complete. I feel like the system that we live in. Anarchy is when there are cops running around bashing kids and women on the heads with sticks. That's anarchy. Like when peaceful protests are being broken up by state power, that's anarchy. That's anarchy that's happening right there.
Yeah.
Because that scene is anarchic. You don't know if you're going to get beat up. The press is getting beat up. They're not supposed to be getting beat up.
I think that's what we
That's
think
anarchy.
anarchy means.
Yes.
It's chaos and violence.
Exactly. That's what people think anarchy is.
Chaos and violence.
Yes.
But anarchy actually means society creating itself through mutual agreements.
Yeah, I slipped into the old definition of anarchy.
Yeah, you
what
did.
people think.
Yeah.
So what we see on the news is what people think is law and order.
Yeah.
But it's chaos.
Well, I think as a minor tangent, it's very interesting and curious to me to watch this zone popping up in Seattle that is very similar to the Standing Rock Village and the Occupy Wall Street Village, and thinking about all of my evangelical friends who have been lovingly and sadly shaking their heads and saying that it's not a racism problem, it's a sin problem. And some people are just more tended towards sinful hearts and godless actions than others.
Right.
And if we take the police away, no one will be there to enforce non-sinfulness on people who aren't following Jesus. So I'm watching this anarchic group rise up and take care of each other, and thinking about people, the 25% of the U.S., that more than 25% of the U.S. thinks that humans are born sinful. Humans are born broken. And when left to our own devices in mass, we will slaughter each other and steal from each other and rape each other and beat each other up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, over 25% of the country thinks that.
Oh, yeah.
So they see something like this zone in Seattle, and they're like, well, that's a nice... They're calling them LARPers. The conservatives are trying to be woke by using the term LARPing,
yes.
which is live action role play,
yes.
which is commonly the parlance of not conservative groups.
Right.
It's people that dress up and play pretend as adults.
Right.
And it's a valid hobby. Like, you're never going to get to be Robin Hood, but you could go do a Robin Hood camping trip in the woods with your friends.
Sure.
That's LARPing.
Yeah.
And the people are using it in a derogatory way, talking about how, like, these kids in Seattle are LARPing, and the real world will come in soon. And so there's no credibility given to the possibility that this kind of community could last, that we could continue working with each other like this.
Right.
That maybe this way of building community, where local people take care of local people, could actually spread further. And instead of us being victims of the system, we would begin to become progenitors of the system.
You sound like a hippie.
Yay!
We have a couple of comments. Benny West said, is there any truth, and you've been looking down the rabbit hole, is there any truth that they are strong-arming the businesses in the zone?
So,
we don't know if there's any truth to it, but she's been looking into it.
Right. So I can't definitively say truth because I'm not there.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Very important.
That even though I'm getting what seems to be first-person information from people who are in the zone,
there's a lot of first-person disinformation.
I'm aware that there are hackers out there who are trying to discredit the movement by spreading misinformation. What I have seen in the first 3 days of this encampment is people who are pointing out all of the lies that have been spread. That the homeless people stole the food and they're already out of food, and people are rioting in the streets and they're breaking buildings and they're already going home to their mommies every night. All these things that aren't actually happening. And she's like, here's what's actually happening. We have community kitchens, and local businesses are donating food to the cause, and local businesses are allowing us to plug electrical cords into their businesses.
Strong arming. It's a big zone. There's a lot of participants. There is no code of conduct for you to go to the place.
I have been looking at news sources of people that think the whole thing is farcical and ridiculous and dangerous.
Sure.
And I've also been looking at news sources that are coming from people who are actually in the encampment, and there is contradiction between the information coming out. I would be curious if Benny had a link to share with me of where he heard that the occupiers are strong-arming businesses to do stuff. So I don't know what they strong-arming them to do, but strong-arming them to do stuff.
Right.
Because then that would give me keywords to follow. I would take those keywords from that article, and I would take the businesses, and I would go look at that business's Twitter page and keywords on Instagram and Twitter that pertain to that article, and I would find other people.
You could find out.
You could go find out if that's actually happening.
And find out if that's an isolated incident or if that's conditions happening.
You can go message that business on Facebook and say, hey, are the occupiers preventing business traffic to your small business during this movement?
Right.
And then they would let you know.
Robert Edwards commented, and he said, anarchy never builds anything. They just take what others have built, feast off of it until it's a carcass, until there's nothing left of value. That sounds like cannibalism in the natural environment to me.
Yeah, okay. But I can understand why he would have that perspective. That I think that's a lot of what people's perspective is. Like,
sure.
I think a lot of people have this perspective that kids can only go play anarchy because the adults have built a system for them to feed off of.
Sure.
That is a perspective that I've heard a lot of people have about anarchy.
Right.
And that's another thing that the neoconservative discreditors were sharing around with each other on Reddit to try to break down the movement. They're like,
here's a systemic
use a purity cycle on them. Talk to the people in the zone and try to gaslight them into thinking they're not woke enough if they're not perfectly woke.
Well, that happens unfortunately naturally. I've seen that happen with a lot of social movements where people jump in and they pick up the sign and they say the phrases, but they don't actually understand the thing that's going on. And that's what happens when you just have random folks show up.
So should we punish people that are trying to help poorly?
Right. I can get, in Hawaii, there was you would find that kind of thing where there are purity tests everywhere. Political correctness helps change things for the positive, and it also inhibits comedy. It inhibits fluidity and change as much as it makes it happen. It also inhibits it. This is the problem. It's like, a little bit is good, too much is poison. And that's what happens when you have these movements. And political correctness comes in to change derogatory.
If you're not doing it exactly this way, it's not the real thing.
And then it becomes the new dogma that is too constraining.
So it's interesting, speaking of Robert Edwards' comment, I looked up anarchy in Google.
Yeah.
And Google's definition of anarchy does not match at all any of the definitions we were given when we spoke with a self-proclaimed anarchist.
Or if you look at the anarchy
history.
as, well, at this moment, literal means figurative.
And something can be true without being a fact.
It literally used to mean literal. Now it means figurative.
Right. So
anarchy means not. It's been used colloquially so long
that they've changed the definition. So it's anarchy, as currently defined in Google, is a state of disorder due to absence or rejection of authority.
Disorder. That sounds accurate.
But the Free Capitol Hill camp is not disordered. It is self-ordered.
Self-ordered.
The difference between anarchy and the things that anarchy is trying to free people from is that within the community of anarchy, as much as I've come to understand it through my little bit of study recently, is that anarchy is about self-ordering rather than Big Daddy ordering you.
Right, and it's also according to what's happening in the moment. Robert Edwards also said, what are the current agricultural output of said zone? Are they harvesting rainwater to drink? Where is the designated landfill? We already covered that earlier in the show where we talked about how these kind of movements really need to consult their poets before they start using words on themselves. It's a very dangerous game to put words on yourself if you haven't gone into the etymology.
They did not choose the word autonomous zone.
Twitter chose that.
Yes.
Twitter chose that.
And you will find signs
Sure.
in the Free Capitol Hill zone that say autonomous zone on them, but they did not pick that. That came out of the internet. There's no central leader telling everybody what to say, so people are just kind of rolling with it.
A lot of people in the zone are really agitated that that word is being used, the autonomous part of the thing is being used.
They're not there to try to be autonomous. They're trying to have a different, as far as I can tell, they're trying to create the possibility of a different experience than the one that we've been having, where people protesting police brutality have been exposed to excessive police brutality. You found a poster. Are you going to share that? You found a poster?
Let me find the Seattle article, because the Seattle article is really good because it puts this movement in context with a history of movements like this in Seattle and shows the kind of change. It may not have been the exact change desired, but it shows a progression of the issue because of these actions.
Yes.
So anarchy, in these situations, anarchy has been the temporary state to demonstrate and to upset until change is, and it happens over and over. So it's not like they're just there being chaotic.
It's self-ordering.
Yeah.
Self-ordering, rather. So the group is ordering itself. Each person, there's no hierarchy. There's no.
That's scary for people. I know it's scary. It's terrifying for people.
A timeline of events. I think I found it.
Yeah?
A timeline of events that led to the Fed Up Rising. The 2020 Fed Uprising. I'm going to share this anyway just because it's a really great article from the Medium. Without proper context, it's impossible to understand the mushroom cloud of uprisings that are exploding across the country in the wake of the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others. To contextualize the anger, frustration, and desperation that is forcing protesters to recreate the lawlessness and chaos that Black people experience on a daily basis, the Root has created a timeline of some of the events that led up to Black people in the country collectively saying, all right then.
Right.
I'm going to share that with our Facebook live streamers.
I am also going to share the article. The article that I read this morning that sent me off on this whole trip was a Seattle Times article. And in that article, they do talk about the history of this kind of action in Seattle and what it has accomplished. So, yes, change can be messy.
If the free man took over that zone, would you feel passionate to support them, or is this strictly ideological? What is the free man?
Oh, the Freeman. I don't know.
You don't know what the Freeman is? It's just.
Hold on, I'm going there.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, share your article. And as far as our favorite libertarian is pointing out, I would think he would be more ideologically aligned with a group of people coming together as a community to decide how they're going to run their society.
Well, I think the nitpicking over the autonomous thing is what he's doing. I don't think it's necessarily about, I don't know, he's not commenting on the content of the thing.
I think the thing that's frustrating our favorite libertarian is that these young whippersnappers are only able to set up this autonomous zone because other people funded and built buildings, infrastructure, power, water, etc.
I believe the socialist system did that. A lot of our social structures did that. The streets department, roads department, trash department, that are social infrastructures.
Right. Well, but the point is, it's not their property.
Right.
So.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a big hang-up for a lot of people in this country still. There's a huge hang-up that it's not yours, so your work is invalid if you're using someone else's property.
It's kinky. I mean, it's really kinky to be all about the constriction of property rights and all that stuff. I know it's really kinky. It's not my thing, though.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that some people have that kink.
Libertarians have this kind of interesting mix of private property and also sharing when I decide to share.
Benny West said he's not trying to be contentious, that he's enjoying the dialogue. We always enjoy the feedback from everybody who wants to participate in the feedback. So. Yeah.
And comments as much as we can. We only have about 5 minutes left before we have to give it up for Big Dan C to set up for audio hallucinations this evening.
Let's talk about our show on Sunday.
Okay.
We have a guest.
And then I want to doink through a couple of the demands that the collective, the Free Capitol Hill people have put out.
Do that, and then let's do a real fast preview of the show on Sunday.
Okay. So this is a really great article that I shared at the beginning of our live stream feed. For those of you who are listening on KBMF 102.5 or buteamericaradio.org, you can find this on medium.com. The demands of the collective Black voices at Free Capitol Hill to the government of Seattle, Washington.
Okay, what do they got?
They open with, in credit to the people who freed Capitol Hill, this list of demands is neither brief nor simplistic. There is no simple request to end chronic police brutality. We demand that the City Council and the Mayor, whoever that may be, implement these policy changes for the cultural and historic advancement of the City of Seattle and to ease the struggles of its people. This document is to represent the Black voices who spoke in victory at the top of 12th and Pine after 9 days of peaceful protest while under constant nightly attack from the Seattle Police Department. These are the words from that night, June 8th, 2020.
All right.
And it goes, it's a long article. So for ease of consideration, we've broken these demands into 4 categories: the justice system, health and human services, economics, and education. And they go through and they're like, we have positive and concrete and well thought out things that you, the government of this city, could change so that the people suffered less.
Right, and doesn't cause people to want to have a damn good pricing.
Yes. So tell us about our show on Sunday.
We're going to talk about the subject of censorship.
Really?
Yeah, we're going to talk about censorship.
Again.
We're talking about it because our friend Gilroy from Helena is driving down to participate in the show. He got censored on my Facebook page for using irony.
Right, the algorithm.
He was being ironic, and the artificial intelligence banned him from it. So there's a post on my page that I can't see because Facebook deemed it hate speech because he was being ironic. He wasn't hating on anybody. So I want to talk about censorship in terms of irony and what will we do if irony is outlawed. And that'd be great for the conservatives because they don't get it anyway. It's true. I mean, it's a condition.
Right.
So
Black and white.
verifiable.
Black and white
conditions,
people.
yes.
Black and white mindsets.
So we're gonna have that show on Sunday for 2 hours and talk about censorship in the modern world, and we're gonna talk about a little bit about the fourth industrial revolution and what the Internet of Things means to us in this new age of what do they call that? Surveillance capitalism.
Ah, for those of you that have seen Westworld.
Yes, we're gonna talk about surveillance capitalism and
making money off
censorship.
of your data.
That's right.
Making money off of information about you.
Off of your being.
The
Every
facts
movement,
of your life.
thoughts, everything.
Yes.
Every
Things
conversation.
you do, stuff you decide, stuff you want. Yeah, and I think we're going to have a bit of a tangential conversation with this conversation about censorship and surveillance capitalism.
Yeah.
About, as well, brainwashing.
Oh yeah, brainwashing. I've heard of it. Could never happen to me.
It didn't happen to me.
I'm my own person who knows my own thoughts.
Yes.
There's no way I could be brainwashed.
Oof.
I get all my news from the mainstream media. I know I'm an informed citizen.
Well, and even people, I mean, even people who get news from not the mainstream media, I mean, like, this is sort of like a diet, you know? To me, it's kind of like a diet. Like, a lot of people say they just want to put their hands up in the air and run around screaming on fire, like, I guess there's just no way I can know what's really going on in the world.
It's impossible to know.
It's impossible. And like, no, actually, it's like a diet. So you go to your doctor, you have knee pain, you have diabetes, you have obesity, and your doctor says, okay, here are the top 3 things to do. Drink more water, take a half-hour walk every day, and stop eating sugar. That will make a huge difference in your health. The comparative version of that would be stop taking in news from mainstream media news sources. CNN,
Just
NBC,
news.
Fox News. Just cut those out entirely.
Infotainment.
It's pointless. It's short. Anyway, I have to move on.
We gotta go. We gotta clear the room, and we gotta take out all the Lysol, all the Purell, all the disinfectants,
Product
and
placement.
scour the entire radio station before Big Dancy comes in with audio hallucinations.
Hashtag coronavirus.
Thanks for tuning into your community radio station. We will see you on Sunday.
Thanks, guys. Whew. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, on the Facebooks. We really appreciate you. It was a lightning session today.
That was a fun, quick show.
I just want to do one every day.